Greetings, greetings. I am one, and this is my story. Very, very personal story that I believe helped me in my spiritual journey. And my intention here for sharing this story here is to help those who may, at this time, may have reached the same point that I reached at that point in my life, and struggling with the same decision that I was struggling with at that point in my life. Okay, and it's about my religion, my belief system. It's about Christianity, the religion that I was born into. First and foremost, a disclaimer before we proceed. I'm not sharing this to bash anybody, to bash any religion. I'm just sharing this to share my own truth, my own personal experience. Okay? The experience that brought me into the spiritual space that I'm in now, that I know for a fact is where I'm supposed to be. Okay? I was born into a Christian family, born into a Catholic family that indoctrinated me into the catechism into Christianity, specifically the Catholic teachings of Christianity from my infancy. Okay, I was baptized from a very young age. My great grandmother, who was a patriarch of my family at that time, was someone who attended church multiple times a week, sometimes multiple times a day. Okay, she would go to church in the morning and in the evening. So growing up as a child, I remember being taken to church twice a day, sometimes in the morning, sometimes in the evening, or sometimes in the afternoon. She threw me at the feet of the church and pretty much immersed me into the teachings of Christianity, and it was from that foundation that the rest of my life was built. I became an altar boy, as a kid, became an altar boy, and along my growth, my childhood, I played many roles in the church. I even played part in the church's drama or dramatization of the birth and death of Jesus Christ. And many times I was chosen to play Jesus or Joseph, okay, from infancy, right? And I remember the biggest part of my childhood, from what I remember, was mostly in the churches, mostly in the church or in the church that we belong to. And I remember from kindergarten all the way to high school, I attended Christian schools, Christian kindergarten. Our kindergarten was run by the church, okay, and it was right next to the church. So it was basically another version of the church, and our entire teachings were basically based on the Bible. Most of what we learned, besides maths and the basics, almost everything was around the Bible, themes of the Bible. We read the Bible multiple times throughout the day. We have Bible studies multiple times throughout the week. Okay, from kindergarten, I went to a Christian primary school. Christian primary school, heavily indoctrinated into Christianity. We start the day off with church service, praise and worship every single day. And throughout the day, we read the Bible, and this continued until until I went to high school. And my high school was a Catholic school, St. Augustine's. And there, the same thing, heavily indoctrinated into Christianity. Okay, every single day there was worship, multiple times throughout the week. We'll have worship and praise. And it continued until I graduated from high school and decided to join the military. And when I joined the military, the same thing continued. When I joined the military and I went to boot camp, the package that we're given, the welcome package that we got at boot camp included, a New Testament. For those who are not Christian, those who are Muslims got Qurans, and those who are Judaism, those who practice Judaism, were given their version, the Torah. And my journey with Christianity continued when I joined the military. And every base I went had a church. There was also a chaplain who was always in constant engagement with other troops, teaching us the principles of the Bible and keeping us in the church, keeping us along the path of the church. And I followed this path until we went to the war in Iraq. And it was during the war in Iraq that things began to change, because until that point in my life, I was dedicated to Christianity. Dedicated. Everything that I did was around Christianity, and my life was, I was convinced, because I was getting confirmations after confirmations after confirmations, that my walk within the church, my walk with Christianity at that time was the right thing, because throughout these periods of my life, I was having dreams and visions and experiences that were all Christian themed. So there was nothing anywhere outside my life that could lead me to question my Christian faith. Okay, what I saw in Iraq during the war in Iraq was what led me to begin the process of questioning the Christian faith, both Christians and Muslims. What I saw in Iraq, okay, killing each other, and the same people killing each other were claiming that they were worshiping the same God. Okay, so it was my experience in that environment that led me to start questioning. And then it was there at these points and other events. The minute I started questioning, then that was when I started having other visions and other, spiritual experiences that began to teach me that there was something else out there besides Christianity. Okay, or there was something else out there that Christianity could not address. There was something else happening out there within our reality, or at least with something else happening to me spiritually that Christians didn't understand. Because along this journey, when I was in Iraq, I was having these spiritual experiences, and I went to my chaplain to ask for help, and I discussed it with my other Christian military men, and none of them had any clue what was going on. Okay, so post my military service, I was convinced that something was happening to me that I didn't understand, because I was having these really intense spiritual things that I just couldn't explain. Okay, so I tripled down into the church. It was so intense that I used to attend 3 churches every Sunday. Okay, every Sunday I'll go to 3 different churches. I'll go to one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and one in the evening. That's how intense my experience was. Eventually, what really cracked the case for me was when, during an Easter service at my last church, I had an encounter with a woman, an old woman, a very old woman. And that encounter was what sparked the curiosity, or at least that spark was there, but it poured fuel on that spark and pushed me to start digging deeper. Okay, because it opened another page. Okay, opened another page to the questions that I was dealing with, or the questions I was battling in my head. So I decided to test the system, to test the church system, to see and gain some clarity, to understand what was really happening within the churches. Okay, so what happened that day, or that very particular day, was during Easter service in 2010. I remember that day very well. 2010. I was waiting to speak to my pastor, as always. Every time after church, we all line up and we greet him. And I had this pretty good relationship with him, so most of the time after church, I hung around and talk to him and have discussions with him and stuff like that. So we had this tradition going on. And on this particular day, we all lined up. Everybody came to speak to him. And as I was standing in line waiting to speak to him, an elderly woman and her daughter came to stand next to me. And they were surprised that someone like me was, at the church. And they were curious about who I am and where I'm from. So I shared my story with them, and I told them I was in the military. And the older woman that I was standing there with said something. And when she found out I was in the military and I'd been to Iraq, said that she had been praying for the war to end. When, as a Christian, she had been praying for the war to end. And she had been praying for the war to end since the war started. And her and her friends formed a group. They were praying to God to end the wars. We're doing the same thing in Iraq. We're all doing the same thing. A lot of our Marines, a lot of my Marine friends who are Christians will gather and pray. And the chaplain will come in, will gather and pray. And we're all praying for the war to end. And I remember when she was telling me this, that bulb went off my head. And started to dig deeper with her. So I said that's one of the things that I believe is my mission, to help bring the war to an end. And from my Christian background, my Christian upbringing, what we were taught was, when you want to do something like that, when you want something to end, all you have to do is pray. All you have to do is pray. And the woman, as we were talking, said all her life, she was a Jew. She came from a Jewish background. She said all her life she's seen war. All her life she was 80-something years old, approaching 90. And she said at that point in her life, she's getting ready to transition. She knows that she's going to transition. And all her life, she's been a Christian. Okay? And all what she's known throughout her life it's this endless cycles of wars, and every time a war manifests, they do the same thing. They pray for the wars to end. And she doesn't understand why the wars keep continuing. She doesn't understand why. And she said that in her lifetime, she'd like to see the wars come to an end. In her lifetime, it will do a lot for her faith. That all the work that she's been putting in praying have actually done something, because she was sick and tired of all these wars. And her daughter was in her 60s, reflected that, echoed that. And we had this exchange back and forth about how important it is for there to be peace in the world and why God is allowing all these things to continue. Okay? So we both brought this up with the pastor and shared with him that we had this conversation. We would like to know why all these wars are going on despite all the prayers. And his response was not enough for me, because it is the same response that I keep getting from preachers. They keep telling us that God does things in wonderful ways and mysterious ways, and nobody really understands his intentions, and he allows these things to occur in order to glorify himself. I was standing in front of a man who should know better, and from what, at least from my point of view at that time, what he was telling me was a bunch of nonsense, because I've heard that so many times from a lot of preachers. And I personally believe that anybody who thinks that what we're doing in Iraq, or the things that men, women, and children were being put through on the battlefield, is to glorify somebody, if any being has the power to stop it but refuses because those experiences glorify them, personally, I consider that individual, or the being, or whatever the entity that is, if they have the power to stop these kind of events, then they refuse. But instead turns it into an event to glorify themselves, I believe that individual is sick. That power is sick. And it was at that moment that I came to realize that I did not agree with that theme. I did not agree with that concept anymore. And I decided to bring that question up with the other preachers that of the other churches, the other leaders of the other churches that I've been attending. And when I visited those churches after that particular service, I sought those leaders out to bring that question to them, and they all refused to talk to me. All of them. Both of them. There was two preachers. And what they told me was that I had to go through this process. I had to go through this one-on-one. I had to go through a program. One of them had a program where it was a Bible program. Okay, a Bible program. This church that I've been attending for about 3 years, okay, more than 2 years, for a while. I've been donating money to every day, and I've seen the pastor and the members of the church, and they've seen me, and they knew me, and I consider them family. When I asked to speak to the leader of the church alone, because I had a question, a very pressing question that I wanted to address, he said, in order for me to have his private time, I had to go through a 3-week program, Bible study program. 3 Bible study, and after that I could add my name to a list. And then when my time comes, he will select me so that I could talk to him. And that didn't sit well with me. So the other church said the same thing. And both churches were run by men of my skin color. Men of my skin color who told me that in order for me to sit down and talk to them, I had to jump through hoops. I had to go through Bible study courses and graduate from a Bible study program for me to qualify to sit down and talk to them. So that pissed me off. And went home that day, I remember very clearly, unhappy with the experience that I had with these church leaders, 3 church leaders. So I reflected on it over and over in the interest of addressing my anger. I pulled an image of Jesus, and I was looking at him, looking at this image, and I started running this question in my head. What is this church thing a lie? Is what the preachers doing a lie? Are they fooling us, or are they lying to us? Are they fucking with our heads? Excuse my French. Are they misleading us? And all these things started going on through my head about what's, and I said, show me the truth, because these men, these 3 leaders that I've been giving so much energy to for 3 years, demonstrated on that day to me that they were not worthy to lead any church, and they had no clue what reality we were living in, and they didn't care. They didn't give a damn. They were just feeding their egos. That's all they were doing, that they were all interested in the money. That they were doing what they were doing, not because they gave a damn about people. They were doing what they were doing because of money. That's it. So as I looked at an image of Jesus, and I kept thinking that people were using his image to mislead people. And I kept reflecting, and this angry emotion kept going through me. So eventually, the anger and everything else burst into tears. It burst into tears. And I, deep within my soul, asked that Jesus shows me the truth, that I want to know the truth, because I was convinced that the experience that I had with the three leaders of the churches that I belong to, that I've been following and giving my money to and time to, were not in my interest, or not open in my interest, or didn't give a damn about me, and were only focused on feeding their egos on stage, and that's it. That's it. They didn't give a damn about the church. They didn't give a damn about people. To them, it was just about playing a role, a business. That's it. I was convinced at that moment in time. So I made a decision that I was never going to return to this church anymore. And I wanted to find something else. I was looking for the truth. And I wanted to ask Jesus to show me. As I was looking at an image of him on my computer, the emotions hit me. I burst into tears. And as a Christian, somebody who's been trained in Christian, indoctrinated into Christian practices, I automatically dropped on my knees to pray. And as I dropped on my knees, the moment my knees touched the ground, the building shook. The building that I was in shook. It shook. And I knew immediately that moment in time that something had happened. That was no coincidence. That something major had just happened. I didn't understand what it was. I didn't have anybody to teach me anything. So I felt the building shake. And because where I lived was along Coldwater Drive, Coldwater Boulevard, in Studio City. So it was a place that had heavy traffic. So I thought it was just traffic. It was a car that traffic or major, it was a truck that went by that shook the building, or something just flew by. Sometimes when helicopters fly by, they fly very close and they shake the building, stuff like that. So I thought it was something mechanical, and I didn't think much of it. So I closed my computer and I felt very exhausted. So I lay down to sleep. I lay down to sleep, to rest, lay down thinking about what was going on. Woke up that night, went about my business. The next day, got ready for school, went to school, and as I was in school that afternoon, that I learned that there was an earthquake that day. That moment, what I experienced was the shaking that I experienced was an earthquake. Well, that was when I picked it up in the news. It didn't hit me. It didn't really make sense to me at that time, because Southern California is known for earthquakes. I didn't connect the dots until a year later, when I was a year later doing an ayahuasca ceremony in Peru. That very experience, or that event, was revealed to me, and it clicked at that moment. That was when I knew that moment, that decision that I made, or the question that I was looking for, what my soul blasted into the universe to find solutions to what my spiritual quest, to find solutions for my spiritual salvation, for my spiritual work, my spiritual journey, the truth when it comes to my spiritual wellness, or at least my spiritual journey. When I made that query, the universe answered it with an earthquake. Or at least the world I will live in answered it with an earthquake. And a few days after that event, I met someone who directed me to a woman, to a community medicine woman, to go and talk to, because I was looking for help. I was battling PTSD. I was having these nightmares about war, about Iraq day and night, and I wanted the nightmares to stop. Okay, the churches were not able to help me. All the churches and all the prayers that I prayed, nothing worked. The medicine, the VA medicated me to bananas. It didn't work. I was still having these nightmares, and still having all these dysfunctional emotions that I couldn't address. So this particular person directed me in the direction of a woman, a medicine woman, and this medicine woman in turn told me to go and try ayahuasca. She was the one to tell me about ayahuasca for the first time. So she told me to try it because she knows people who've been dealing with the same thing that I've been dealing with, who tried it and it worked. So I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. packed my things and I headed for Peru. Okay? And when I got there, I went through trials and tribulations of running through multiple shamans, diabolic, evil shamans, and eventually I found a good one. Okay? And this good one brought me into a space where I was really able to see what was happening to me or what happened to me and the truth about who I am, my presence here on this planet, my spiritual journey and my spiritual lineage and my connection to the spiritual realm, my authority and my rank in the spiritual realm was revealed to me. Okay. Post that event or that experience, that was when I decided to walk away from Christianity completely. Because at that point, I had been convinced beyond any doubt that Christianity was misleading me. They were giving me a false sense of spiritual salvation or spiritual wellness or spiritual protection. When the truth is, what they were offering me had nothing to do with even my spirit at all. Nothing. So I sat down at one point, went through a list of things and people and events that pretty much backed up my decision to walk away from Christianity.